everyone. Welcome to this month's Rochester Xamarin. Today is December 9th, 2020. This is going to be our last session of the year. And before we get started, like always, I like to struggle with PowerPoint. Thank our sponsors. The .NET Foundation provides us with the the meetup.com account, so everyone could find out how to come here. And my company, File on Q, provides the online meeting tools so we can do this remotely and online. Today we have Mitchel Sellers here presenting on Xamarin Forms tips and tricks for rapid development. I did not pull up the bio, but I've known Mitch for many years, so I'm just gonna shoot from the hip. He's a Microsoft MVP and has been doing mobile development for years, along with ASP.NET Core web development. He's also a pilot instructor in his free time, which I found really cool, which is why you see all the planes in the background of his image. I've done work with him personally, so I'm excited to have him here and talk about his rapid development tricks. So without further ado, I'll let you take it away, Mitch, and reintroduce yourself. So I'll stop sharing and I'll make you a presenter.
All right.
Actually, I think I've already made you a presenter.
Yeah, I think I'm good. Now let's see if I can mess up either Teams or PowerPoint, or potentially both. We're really good. All right. So hopefully, there we go. Looks like that's working. So yeah,
Perfect. I see your screen.
fantastic. All right. So I appreciate everybody being here tonight. And the idea behind this session is really around trying to help demystify some of the things that we've seen as I've been building and doing more with Xamarin. The rabbit holes, those things that we did that was like, oh, there should be a simple client fix. Let's go ahead and get that done. My background is, as Andrew mentioned, I'm a Microsoft MVP, have been for 12 years, also an ASP Insider. So I've been moving from mostly web-centric to doing a lot of mobile because there's a lot of demand. I've got a lot of client things that are out there. And what we've learned as I've worked to transition my team forward is that there's certain things with Xamarin Forms where it's very easy to lose days, if not weeks, by tripping on things that maybe if you looked at it a little bit different way or a little bit aware of some of the stuff that's out there, it might save you a bunch of time. And in doing so, I've started to kind of dig in to a little bit more of what it is I look at with Xamarin Forms, and do I like it or do I otherwise, right? The question I always get, right, is Xamarin Forms good? And the answer is it's amazing, right? For C# developers, we can use the same tools that we use for everything else all the time. So no doubt in my mind, is it something that we want to use? But it's fast-paced. And this is something that for those of us that have been around for quite a while, we've seen some of the repercussions of the fast-paced environments in the .NET world. The .NET Core, now .NET side of things is another great example of that fast-paced environment. And one of the reasons why that fast-paced environment makes Xamarin Forms a little bit interesting is the documentation or finding out how to do something is absolutely exhausting. What we've learned is that, a lot of times, right, how do we go and do something new? Almost all of us, right? We Google it. That's how we live. Or we use Bing to Google things, but that's also, whatever. But the idea is, I want to be able to go out and find out, hey, I have this problem, somebody else has probably solved it, right? Not a lot of times are we solving something 100% totally net new. So why is that so complicated with Xamarin Forms? We took a step back and started looking at the mobile OS world and its evolution. With web forms, and all of the old ASP.NET stuff and the move to MVC and then the move to .NET Core, there was obviously changes with the web, but it wasn't like what we've seen on the mobile side of things. The mobile OS evolution is just going like wildfire, right? As the devices become more powerful, the platforms start having more features. as we get more CPU, as we get bigger screens, as we get bigger cameras, as we get new technology, right? The OS is evolving at a breakneck pace. Xamarin releases at a breakneck pace, right? They do a really good job of making sure that we have a Xamarin release that works for our particular version, right? So iOS 14 was released. We have a release that worked with iOS 14. But where our problems start to run in is that the bloggers will sometimes react faster. Just because Xamarin has something that works with iOS 14 does not necessarily mean that Xamarin Forms has full first-class support for all of the features. So what ends up happening is Xamarin gets the release out, iOS 14 is out, and then now we get all of the people that are like, I'm going to use this new feature even though Xamarin doesn't have it. So they blog these big, huge, complex workarounds about, here's how you get this working with Xamarin Forms. They got the first article in, they get the SEO rank, their articles become popular, and all of a sudden we're looking at old stuff. The problem is, what was needed then may not be exactly what is happening now. So they released it. Oh, to get dark mode support, you've got to jiggle this handle, you've got to write a custom renderer, and then you have to turn around twice in your chair and click the button and hope it works. Which, if you look at any of the early blog posts for supporting dark mode on iOS and Android, that's pretty much what you had to do. So how do we start to devolve that, or what are some of those tips and tricks that we've learned, and how can we help make things a little bit easier? So what we did is I started to collect the things that we are trying to do to make our apps easier. And it's a little bit of a smorgasbord of tips. And again, chime in if you've got questions or thoughts along the way. But a few of the things that were really irking my team, right, was we got this great concept now with all of the new Xamarin Forms ability to do tab bars, to do flyouts, and all of those kinds of things. You have the cute little icons. Well, I'm not a designer, and no one wants me to be one. And most of my developers are a little bit more developer-centric. And I'm like, well, we use Font Awesome everywhere in the web. Well, how do we use Font Awesome in Xamarin Forms? And I will tell you, I found 400 different ways to do this. And what we found out is you can actually add Font Awesome into your project and allow it to be used within icons in a matter of minutes. And none of the articles that you find actually show it in that simple of a manner. I do have a sample project with some of these things in it, so you guys will be able to see it as well. But to make things a little bit easier, I've extracted everything into the slides. What we are trying to do with this, right, is we didn't want to use the individual icons. We want to be able to use the free libraries or even the paid versions. So I'm showing you everything here with the paid or the free version of Font Awesome. You could do this with the paid version. You could do this with any other font library, right? If you like some of the other icon sets, it's all going to work similar. And what we're trying to do is be able to create that consistency, right? A lot of times we have a mobile app that maybe complements a web app or a desktop app. By utilizing Font Awesome across all of those, we're going to be able to do everything in a single consistent manner. The first thing that we need to do is we need to go out and actually grab our font files. And this is the part that, funnily enough, is more complicated than you actually imagine. But we can go out to Font Awesome. This is a direct link that takes you out there, and I'll share these slides later on tonight on my blog site for you guys to be able to get access to. And we want to take those font files and we need to drop them into the resources folder inside of our iOS app and inside of the assets folder inside of Android. If you go read a lot of the tutorials, a lot of the articles that are out there, they're going to tell you, oh, you've got to go, do this, do that, check these boxes. Literally, grab the files, put them in those folders, don't do anything else. The next thing we need to do is we need to tell iOS, because it's nice and picky, that we are utilizing some additional fonts. This is where we simply, inside of our info key list, we add a new key and array value here, saying that we're utilizing the 3 different components that make up the Font Awesome library. The brands, the overall free stuff, and the solid one. Brands gets us things like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and otherwise, solid gets us the real solid. And then inside of our app XAML, we need to create some font definitions so that we can point out our references to each of those libraries. So we want to be able to reference them, again, as Font Awesome Brand, Solid, and Regular, because those are the common names. And we reference them ever so slightly different. And this is where it's really kind of important to, you have to look at the fonts themselves and figure out how they're referenced. So we can see that with Android, we reference them by file name, and then there's a key that we're going after the regular one. And then we go on iOS and we reference them just a little bit different with the naming conventions. We take this, copy this, drop this between each of our projects, and get things going really quickly. Now, we've got that taken care of. There is a bunch of places online where you can go download a single file that gives you a reference to all of the Font Awesome icons, and then you get an enum value. I have it in the source code here as well. But basically, then we can utilize the font image markup extension to be able to replace anywhere that we go. And I do know the guy, right, that wrote it. And the nice thing here is we simply say, hey, for our icon, we want to use a font image. It's this font family, which we reference out to our collection. And then we simply choose what glyph we want to use. This allows us to really quickly get everything that we want nice and easy. And now we can place any of these icons. I just happen to use it in the flyout menu here as an example. This is one example. If you go and Google how to do this, you're going to find a whole bunch of other things. This is the process end to end. It's very, very easy to be able to accomplish these tasks. And again, we want to make sure we do things the right way. Diving in a little bit deeper, we start to look at some of the other things. And somebody mentioned that forms made things easier. Yeah, no, not really. This is where we get forms that gets us 90% of the way all the time, and that last 10% where we have to find all of the individual unique solutions, and that's kind of what we're after here. If you create a new project today within Xamarin Forms, Xamarin Essentials are automatically included. If you created a new project with Xamarin Forms like 2 months ago, Xamarin Essentials wasn't included. It kind of was silently included in a recent change. I'm not even sure exactly when it came in, but it is absolutely a magic decoder ring to a lot of things that you wanted to do and you had no idea how to do them within your application. And I'll take it one step further and say that this, including this NuGet package, is going to give you some of the tools that you need to not do the naughty things that people have been doing for years. Some key elements, we're going to talk through a couple examples, specifically with sharing, connection, but there's also an ability within Xamarin Essentials to do secure storage. So one of the things that I've seen with developers as we go and review things is, the user logs in and they get a JWT token. Unfortunately, in a lot of code, I have seen people add a string to the app CS file and say JWT token and store that there. Well, that's not a great place to store it. It's not a secure place to store it. It doesn't get, persist with the device, and well, there's a whole bunch of other reasons. Xamarin Essentials provides some secure storage options that allow you to simply put the element into the keychain so you can access it, making life a lot easier. Gives you abilities to go after things like the battery, devices. I want to see what the compass is doing in a flashlight. I want to react to the phone being shaken, those kinds of things. And the documentation is fairly good. If you go straight to the Essentials documentation and straight to the component that you're looking for, that documentation is going to be on point. However, there's been a lot of change in the Essentials solution over time, and some of their bits of documentation have little asterisks at the very top. You need to make sure to do this setup at the beginning. And I think it's important that we always look at those kinds of things, because it is amazing how quickly some of those things will creep up on us and cause a lot of problems in our development. Digging into things that a lot of people are looking to do, and there's all kinds of different recommendations on how to be able to do things. And that is being able to share something from your application to others. Let's just say that the user has generated some content and you want to share that content with somebody else. And both iOS, Android, and other devices have implemented an ability to share. So you can get, this just happens to be a screenshot out of the emulator of sharing a PDF document, right? I can share it via Bluetooth, Drive, Messages, Gmail, or any number of other applications. And the solution recommendations were slightly mind-numbing in terms of the differences in methods to accomplish. Well, in the Xamarin Essentials, we have an ability to do this with a single line of code that we can do from within our view models. In this example here, with the first bit here, we'll just create a dummy file, right? This most likely would have been a PDF generator. It could have been a number of other things, and we simply write it to the cache directory because we don't care about long-term storage with that information. And then we simply call share request async. We create this share request and we give it a title and a file. That's it. We await that answer and then we carry on the application's execution. There's nothing that we need to do other for configuration. We don't have to request any particular permissions or anything like that, and we'll be able to get that information. The next piece, as we look at the ways that applications work together, one of the number one things is we have such a push, right, for password security. And to be able to use secure passwords, to be able to support the use of a password manager, right? It could be iOS retaining them, it could be 1Password, it could be LastPass, right? We're really driving our users to utilize these tools. Well, our mobile apps, when they start working, right, we get the little key icons that say, hey, look at the password manager, but they don't know where to go. And they don't know where to go and obtain the password manager information. If you go out and Google some of this information, because it's been supported for a while, a lot of the examples talk about large code changes and a number of things that you need to do inside of your application. The reality is this is nothing more than a configuration-based element, but it does require us to make some configuration changes to your existing web application or your existing domain that you're trying to associate to, as well as to both your iOS and your Android mobile apps. But at the end of this, we get a seamless experience for your users. If they've logged into your website and they've saved a password, when they bring up your mobile app and they click on the little password icon, they're going to be able to utilize the same password. That's going to make your user's experience easier. It's going to reduce the number of errors you get with your application, the number of people needing to do password resets, and similar things. What we want to make sure we understand here is that our existing documentation isn't necessarily correct. But the biggest thing is, if you did not set your app up for this initially, you do have to change the publish profile for your iOS applications. And this is something that a lot of people end up missing. Adds a little bit of time, a little bit of complexity to what you're doing. But again, a very easy thing to be able to configure. We need to place two files in our web application in a .well-known folder. The first file that we need to create is for iOS. And this is one that can be a little bit complicated depending on what web technology you have. We need the file name to be created as apple-app.site-association. There's no file extension to it. It is simply a text file response. And we need it to contain this JSON format, where you would replace the team ID with your value from the Apple developer website, and then your app identifier would be put in there. So it's typically a random set of numbers and then whatever your app identifier is. This file needs to be placed, needs to be accessible with your domain name, must be HTTPS secured, cannot have any redirects or anything else done to it. It must instantaneously respond. So getting that ready is kind of step one. For Android, we need to do a similar thing, but it's a much larger file that basically says some of the same things. What's really interesting here is we have to associate two different elements to do the same thing. So this becomes, again, in that .well-known folder. The file name for this is assetlinks.json. And we need to set up two different associations, basically one to associate for the web and one to associate for the app. So the first bit here, right, we say the target namespace is web, and where it says site, this is going to be the fully qualified domain name for your web app. https:// etc. And then we have down at the bottom half here, we have the target for the Android app. We need to put the package name in here as our app ID, and then we need the certificate thumbprint from our certificate that was used to publish into the App Store, our signing certificate for the APK. We take this, we put this information out there, and now we've made the changes necessary for our web app to be able to complete the process on its side. In the Android app, we need to create a new file for within the resources values section, which is going to basically say, hey, I am pointing to here to bring in these additional asset statements. So this does an include HTTPS, and you'll put in your domain name there, which is a direct link to the file. A couple of notes with this process is that, one, it is something that is cached fairly heavily. So making sure you've got the file right the first time makes your life a lot easier. The other thing that we've noticed based on documentation, and it appears to still be true, this will not work on a device until the application has been actually published through the store for the first time. So you're going to test it on your emulator and it's not going to work. You're going to get the app published and it's going to get out to the store, and then it is going to work. It's not a very intuitive process, but that's the experience we've had as recently as this week when we've made the change most recently for another client. So making sure that you have all of these values correct is going to be really imperative to your release process to push additional releases out quickly. The other thing that we need to do is we need to update our Android manifest to basically point to that additional metadata. So inside of our application node, we'll simply reference our newly created string asset statements, and that completes everything that we need to do from a Android perspective. On the iOS side, it's fairly simple as well. In our app identifier, we need to go in and check the box for associated domains. If you didn't have that selected before, you'll have to regenerate your published profile. It's important to note, you do not in your identifier say what domains. You're simply saying that you want to associate domains with your resources, which sometimes people go looking for additional settings. Inside of the app itself, then we need to add one bit to our manifest, which is an associated domain. And the piece that is a little bit interesting, and the documentation is a little bit unclear, is it's not, associate domains and you put your domain name in. We want to associate for the purpose of credentials. So it's web credentials, which is the service that we want, a colon, and then our domain name without the HTTPS and www beforehand. So I've seen a number of people that will go in and put in just the domain name or something like that, and you're going to get through varying states of success in publishing if you have that value incorrect. Now the good news is this works instantaneously. If you've deployed the files and done the other steps earlier, when you're in the emulator, this is going to work. When you're working on your local device before you publish to the store, you're going to be able to validate it. So it makes it pretty easy from a developer perspective to really bring that full circle together for your end users. The other thing as we relate to all of this, right, we have connectivity, right? If we let log in, we need to be able to let people know that people are connecting. If we have an app that does other things, we need to be able to, do a lot of things with connection checking and validation. What we've seen developers do is simply make a call, and if the call fails, then they go and do something. Well, what happens in a lot of cases is that we get a really poor user experience when we follow that behavior. If we simply try to make a call and we're taking action once it fails, we are going to result in a lot of user delays, right? Default HTTP timeouts are typically 30 seconds. So we're going to have users sitting in your app twiddling their thumbs waiting for 30 seconds to determine, oh gosh, I don't have connectivity. With Xamarin Essentials, we have a very simple check to be able to determine if we have connectivity. And with that, it's simply connectivity.network access, and we can compare it to an enum value of internet. As you look at the way that you build your application, it's important to be able to determine when should you check this and what might you do. For example, if you're going to a login page and you want your users to log in, but you don't have network connectivity, this will be a great time to utilize this to show them a message, hey, this will be available when you're back on the internet, and check back in a regular interval, or let them click a button to refresh and say, hey, I'm back online now. This is huge from a user experience perspective. The other thing is we've noticed that this little bit of detail and following this protocol has helped get through the App Store as well. For example, one of the apps that we had, they were doing some testing. We're not exactly sure what they were doing, but the app became non-responsive, so they rejected the app and sent it back because they just saw it sitting in a busy state. Well, come to find out, we had a bad URL that resulted in the timeout. But this is something where we want to be able to give them some feedback, because if they can't connect to the internet, they're going to be able to get a little bit better feedback, a little bit better end user experience, and you can take better action from a developer. The next thing, and the one that I think is the bane of a lot of developers' existence, is the concept of dark mode support. There are all kinds of articles out there that tell you how to support dark mode, and they have some crazy ideas. They have ideas of creating new resource dictionaries and writing a bunch of code and swapping the resource dictionaries on the fly and doing all kinds of additional things within your applications. Well, the reality is, don't trust any of those. Even some of the newest articles, as recent as a year or even less, they talk about setting experimental features and all of this kind of thing. You don't need to do any of that. You can literally utilize the app theme binding markup extension. And with the app theme binding, you can basically take any binding. So this could be a background color, this could be to a font, this could be to an image, basically about anything that you're looking for. You can do a theme binding. If it is a dark theme, bind to this. If it's a light theme, bind to this. You follow this and run through your entire application UI UX experience, you get full support for dark and light mode. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to configure your app. You don't need to add a bunch of code. You don't need any custom renderers. You'll be able to dive right in and start with what you're looking to get to, nice and easy. So those are some of the things we've seen on the more global application scale, right? That are already there. You create a new project, you go from there. Andrew's asking if this is still experimental. It is not. You do not have to set the experimental flag for app theme binding to work, which makes it fantastic. Just like a collection view is no longer experimental. So by far, right, big things. But this is the thing, we don't know, right? Do we know if it's experimental? You don't know until you try, right? And that's one of the things that I think is really hard with Xamarin moving forward. And one thing that I think is a little bit interesting is Xamarin Essentials is maintained by the Xamarin team, right? Xamarin Forms comes out, their Xamarin Essentials releases, they're doing the things that they want to do. And I like to think of Xamarin Essentials and some of the things that we've been talking about here, right, is those low-level things that everybody wants, right? But as much as they're open source and we can contribute to them, they serve a purpose. But we as app developers have common things that we do with all of our projects. And that's where the Xamarin Community Toolkit project comes into play, in my opinion. We have all of these things that we need to do on a regular basis. And this is where, with the Xamarin Community Toolkit, we get a collection of behaviors, we get a collection of converters, a collection of effects, extensions, and it's our place to contribute back to the Xamarin community. It's our place to be able to add to Xamarin the things that we need in all of our projects, right? For example, how many of us have created a parser or a converter that converts a Boolean value to a string, or creates a Boolean value to certain visibility settings, or whatever the case may be, right? We have those converters that, like, we literally create a new project and we're like, I did that in this other project. I go grab it and drop it in. The community toolkit is something out here that's trying to help us get some of those tools pulled together into things that we can reuse, things that we can contribute to, things that are driven by the community. And that, I think, gives us a great way to take everything that we've seen before, everything that we have with Xamarin Forms, everything that we have with Xamarin Essentials, and packages it up into kind of a neat little box for us of things that really make our lives as developers better. So what I want to do is show you guys a little bit of the sample and some of the things that come with the community toolkit, because I think it's important to understand the things that others see that are really common. And I think if you've got things that you're working with, this is an area for us to continue to make the Xamarin experience better for everyone. And I think this is one of those key areas that we can all contribute to and make life better for everyone. So give me 1 second to kind of switch my share around here. There we go. All right, and everybody should see my emulator here. The nice thing with the community toolkit is, rather than being bombarded with a really large, hard to read bit of documentation, it simply comes with a sample app. You can run it on Android, you can run it on iOS, you can run it in WPF, and we can explore what's here. Once you've gone through and explored, you find what you're looking for, you can go in and determine what you want to do. The nice thing is you can even choose languages and switch between English and Spanish. Strongly recommend that if you don't know any other language, don't change that. But basically, we get behaviors are one of the things that I think we all struggle with. Form validation and input validation has to be one of the things that I think I've seen at least 300 different ways of doing it. And that's where primarily the behaviors are. There's a couple additional behaviors in here. But for example, email validation behavior is something that allows you to quickly give a user some visual feedback with an invalid email entry. And this allows you to simply add the behavior to your input rather than requiring a whole bunch of additional boilerplate work from you on every single step of your process. And as I look at what we want to what we want to do from a developer perspective, it's a lot easier for us to be consistent when we can go through and change things a little bit more quickly. So a behavior, for those that haven't played with them, is very simply an addition to any of your input fields. So in this example, we have the reference to the Xamarin Community Toolkit. We have our entry, which has a placeholder of email, and then we have a behavior added, which is the email validation behavior. And we have a number of additional things, and one of the things we have, do we want to trim? And then invalid style is, what do we want to do when it's invalid? So this allows us to control the behavior. We can see up here, right? We've defined that an invalid entry is simply marked as red. You could do whatever you wanted to do with this. If you want to do a bunch of additional highlighting or controls, you're going to be able to have that flexibility. If we come and look then at some of the other things that we get, we'll see here that a lot of the common things that we solve for in a lot of our projects are going to be existing here. We have a numeric validation validator here. So for example, we have a minimum value of 1, we put in a value of 0, we get an error. There's a maximum decimal places value. So if we put in 4 decimal places, it's not going to work. We come in and put in only our 2 decimal places, which matches the criteria. We're going to be able to do this. The nice thing is that if we combine this behavior with other things, we can not only have the validation that we're going to have in our form itself, we're going to be able to provide better user experience. We're going to be able to provide them a little bit better experience on, hey, I did this wrong, so they don't get all the way to the bottom and see an error, similar to the things that we might do with a web application. We have some animation behaviors. So one of the things that we can do is if we do something to, we can do different actions based on people clicking different things. So we can do a fade, we can rotate something, we can flip something. We can make it very obvious that you click the toggle. Make it very obvious that you worked with a checkbox. And these behaviors, right, we don't have to do the work. We don't have to include them in our projects. Masked input is probably the most common format that we see a request for. This allows us, for example, credit card number. One of the biggest things that we see people asking for is, hey, I want to be able to input the credit card number, but I want it to be really easy for my users to understand. They type it in. We still have the numeric keyboard to prevent them from typing in other characters, but we get them the masking and input that matches expectation. We can do the same thing here with dates. This is the only example, in my opinion, right, that's a little bit out there, right? We probably want to use a date picker most of the time, unless you're doing something, way back in the day. We could do something, really easy, providing a quick user input experience. Other things that we're looking at here are other behavior experiences that we can use to make much easier for us. Be things like URL validation, and then we can do multiple validation behaviors together. So URL validation, right, makes pretty much sense, works just like email. But multiple validation is one of those things that you can go through and combine multiple validations together. So for example, we can do number validation, to do things, but like password validation. We can do multiple different things. So this is how we can get a nice user password validator. And this is something that, again, from a user perspective, it's often hard for them to be able to see exactly what's going on, but we can even do that validation on a password field. Is this perfect? Is this absolutely the best way to do some of the UI UX? Maybe not, but it's going to save a whole bunch of time, even if you just went with the masked input. For me, with our users, masked input and number validation are probably two of the biggest things. We've already built ways to stop the form from submitting, but giving that user some good little good feedback of what's going on, it is definitely something that let's leverage the community experience for this. One that I really like, especially for Android users, is this concept of the user stop typing behavior. This is kind of a really cool thing in a couple of ways. It's being used here to kind of demonstrate an autocomplete style thing, right? So the way that this is set up is user stop typing after 1 second, minimum length is 0 characters, and then should it just notice the keyboard automatically. I'm gonna turn this on because the one thing that I really hate with some of the mobile apps, right, is you get to that last field in the form and you're typing it out, and the keyboard is still there. You have to minimize it to get to your button. Well, we can use this behavior to automatically hide the keyboard once the user's done typing. If they go and tap back into the field, the keyboard comes right back again, and they can go through and do whatever it is that they want to do. So you can use this even on limited fields to try to give a little bit better user experience. Again, common problems that a lot of us have seen. Max length behavior, character, character count. This is, again, nice thing is, you're looking for individual things, right? I need to know uppercase letter, any number of characters. So you can use this validator to do a number of different things, right? I can verify that we're 2 to 20 of any character. This combined with the other multiples is how you're able to do things like, hey, I need 1 digit, 1 letter, 5 uppercase, 5 lowercase, that kind of thing. As we go back and in a few of these things, we can also determine, we can do some automatic, addition of things. I don't have as much of a use for that or great examples yet, but I know it's been a very common thing. The last one that I want to cover under behaviors is event to command. This has to be one of the biggest things for those of us that are doing MVVM, is we can map any event to a command so that we can do things from our view model. So for example, this period here, we click on the button, the click event goes and triggers a command. So we don't have to use just the item command, and allows us to do a lot of other interactions. As we look at how do I interact with the list, a list to do this, or how do I do these kinds of things, this is a great way for you to be able to take and support MVVM quite easily, and we don't have to bring this in with all of our individual projects. Taking a step from behavior to converter, we look at a lot of things about how do we do conversions of a couple of things. One of the big ones, right, is a date time offset ability, right? So we can come in and choose the 16th, and we'll see that we can get that with a proper date time offset, making things a little bit easier. And what's nice with all of these is they work. You're going to get a similar behavior in Android as you are iOS and otherwise. I think the converters area here is a big one that we're going to see more items come into play as the community grows. And there's a lot that we could throw in here. There's a lot of things that could be proposed. I'll be interested to see exactly what the criteria end up being to accept some of these. A really fun one that we use in a lot of our projects is the byte array to image converter. So this allows you to utilize from your view model a byte array and get it converted to an image source in your binding. So you can have a view model that has a byte array as its property, and that then becomes image source. So think of things like a list of individuals, and you want to show their photos, kind of like what this is doing here. You can bind to the byte array, make an API call in the background, retrieve those bytes, and you don't have to do anything funny with that image. You don't have to find a way to be able to get it to display to the user. We found this one to be incredibly valuable for our data connected mobile apps. And you can also use a multi-converter to do, a couple of other things as well. So for example, it is going to convert everything to uppercase, and it's going to make sure that it's not equal to a particular text case. So, we can go through and look at all of these, these kinds of things to be able to determine what we want to do. And all of that, again, allows you to assemble some of the things that you're looking for. Two of the ones that I think are really big for people is item tapped event args. So this allows you to tap on an item and then have an argument there. So, item tapped was person 1, we can cancel out of that. Item tapped person 2. Makes your life a little bit easier when you're trying to interact with these, with particular controls to be able to understand what you're looking to do. And again, the power here with a lot of this is the simplicity in the example. And the item tapped event arg converter is really one of the biggest ones that we use with our projects. And I wanted to kind of just dive into this just a little bit more, right? We have a list view with an item template here that has, a number of things. It just has an ID and a name binding. This could be any form of other content. But then we have a behavior on that list view, and we simply change the item tapped, we tie it to a particular command, and then the event arg converter is what is used to do this. But notice that I have not done we haven't done anything else. So what gets actually passed into this item tapped command? If we go in and look at our particular, give me 1 second here. Where in the world did we go? My Teams view is in my way here, so sorry about that. We can see here that our item tap command is a new async command, and it accepts the actual person object. So you get the full binding object that was used, so you can do whatever you want. In this case, right, we just grab person.name, but we could get ID, we could do anything else. This makes our code that much more simple, and this is a behavior that I think almost every single mobile app that we've ever built has needed, and I've accomplished it myself 5 different ways based on what our level of experience was at the particular point in time. And we'll just look at a couple more things here. As I mentioned, I think there's some other converters that are definitely going to be there. Effects are another, nice thing. Basically, we can make sure that, safe area effect, one of the nice things is it's to make sure that you don't get into, clipping content. So for example, rounded devices, unfortunately I'm in the Android emulator, so you're going to toggle this and not see anything different. But the iOS devices have the little notch out. They also have the rounded corners. This basically will allow you to, make sure that you don't get your content clipped. This is something that we dropped this into a couple of our projects, and it's really helped some of our design people make things look a little bit better. Remove all select text effect. This is one that's kind of nice to be able to, so we click on this. This is the default behavior of an entry field, but we can do the same thing here. Makes everybody's life a little bit easier. Hey, I want to do this. I want to change this. I was wrong. I can update this, click away, and get the behavior. I find that from an end user perspective, things like this are a little bit questionable, because sometimes you can easily get into a situation where you end up deleting content that you didn't mean to. But we have some other things too. We have touch effect basically allows you to change the appearance of command, the touch state for a particular thing. And the, let's see, there's nothing in there for examples. And that's the test cases. And here we go. So the last bit that they have here are view controls. And some of these I think are really common things. I know that there's a few additional things that I think are being contributed here fairly soon. But avatar views, you know, a simple layout to be able to do user avatars with, you know, an image or initials. Badge views, you know, we see all of the times that we have badges. The nice thing is you can put them, you know, where you want to and do additional styling. I think that example really needs a little bit more, you know, example of making it look nicer. We have the ability to do a live preview from the camera, take pictures, record video. This doesn't work great within the particular emulator that I'm using right now. Docking layout allows you to do some docking. A Gravatar image source, it's just a way of being able to you know, go with a default Gravatar, find individual persons. You can do all of this. We can set the size of this. Well, maybe if we type. Right, so we get the ability to, you know, pull in other things that we may want to use quickly within our application. And expand our controls, so basically you can do those. Media element is amazing for being able to do video and audio playing. This is something that, you know, a lot of things you have to do extra things. So this gets me a nice little, you know, gets me a nice video player. Again, there's a little bit of styling within their examples that maybe, you know, we probably want to change. Like if you notice here, the little where we are in the video is a little bit out of where we need to be. And then snack bar and toast, these are some of the ones that we find a lot of times we get people that want to show something quickly, and how do we do it? And so, you know, a toast notification showing up, message automatically closed by a timeout, a snack bar message, you know, kind of a little bit more, hey, do I want to do something? You know, we can click on the action, and then a much more detailed snack bar. These behaviors alone, right, we see a lot of times. I mean, sure, we have the ability to do alerts and other things, but this is definitely a couple of other things that we might be able to do with a lot less work on our side. And this is, I think, the area that we're going to see the biggest growth. There's a side menu view, basically gets your left and right menu controls. It depends on what you're doing, right? There's a lot more usage of flyout and tab, I think, for a lot of individuals. Shields give you some kind of badge information. Again, gives you a way to do some nice status updates. You know, state views for everything. So we can do, you know, some different loading states. We can do saving. Gives a little bit better doing a nice full screen loading indicator as well. This is a really nice thing to be able to do. Hey, I'm saving. Keep people from doing things, let them know your app's working, that kind of thing. And then uniform grid. This is something that basically makes sure that your grids are all the same size. I'm not going to lie, this one makes me very angry that I didn't know about this when I did something else, when I was trying to do something similar to this. But then tab view is the only other big thing. There's a lot of things you can do with tabs. So you can do tabs with badges. You can do nested tabs. You can, you know, do a lot of things here. I caution people with this one. You know, don't make your apps so darn confusing that people don't know what they're doing. But the nice thing is it gives you a way of being able to be on and give tabs following that tab bar side of things. So from my perspective, what I wanted to kind of show you guys tonight is that, looking out at some of the things that we are doing, the way that we might build something, the way that you might go and research what's out there, or what's going to be the right way to do something, or what's the newest thing within Xamarin, it becomes really important to realize that some of this stuff, right, is evolving so fast that if you read a blog post and it says, hey, this is how to do it in Xamarin Forms, and it was January of 2020, you may want to change the way that you're looking at things, because there's a lot of effort here to move things forward, to start reducing the level of developer effort necessary to accomplish common tasks. And I think that this is a project that we all can get behind. They have a really good process of how they approve pull requests and what they include or what they won't include. So I'm excited to see this, and it gives us something from a developer perspective that we can count on that has good overall community support. So we're not going after and taking Mitch's Xamarin library, right? Which we have some .NET we have some .NET Core libraries that people really do depend on. But it's nice to be able to know that there's a much bigger group behind the community toolkit, and it's something that I think that we can continue to see evolve. And the idea here is we want to be able to build things quickly, but we also want to be able to focus on building our apps and not solving the same problem that everybody else has solved in every other app that they've built with Xamarin in the past. Any questions, thoughts, anything that you want to do? This is really what I had for everybody today. And Andrew, if you want to come back on here as well, I'm glad to have everybody here.
Well, that was a great presentation. Someone's got an open one. So if anyone's got any questions, feel free to open up your mic or ask in the chat if you are uncomfortable opening the mic. And if there are no questions, we will go into group time in a few minutes. I'll give people a couple minutes to ask some questions.
It's like Tom, you made note of, oh gosh, it's sort of away. The stability of each release. If anything, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would almost say that by the time it's released, it's really good. If anything, it's maybe taking a little bit longer to get a release published because of testing, but at least that's what I've seen. I mean, I have not, the stuff that's out there just works.
So I'll speak a little bit to that. I'm disclaimer, I'm not a maintainer with the Xamarin Community Toolkit, but I'm working very closely with the core team on it as an active contributor. And so right now, the toolkit is in a preview mode supporting Xamarin Forms 5. And the goal is to have a stable 1.0 version of the toolkit relatively soon. I don't know exactly when that's going to be, if that's going to be this year or if that's going to be next year. For anyone watching the video, it is middle of December right now, so next year is not that far away. And I'm not 100% sure on the release schedule, but one of the things to directly answer that question, one of the things that I was told was, if you have a feature that you want to implement, or there's an issue you see that you want to implement, but you can't do Android, iOS, UWP, WPF, GTK Sharp, Mac OS, and whatever else we support on it, and you just want to do the Android implementation, go ahead and do that. You're not required to do all of the implementation. So there very well could be some features that are not fully implemented. I think the goal, though, is to have the big three implemented with the 1.0 release for anything that's supported. So that's going to be your Android, iOS, and UWP. But so far, everything has been pretty robust. I believe there's been some quirky behavior with the media element and the camera control that the community has been rallying around to get flushed out before the first release.
And I think from my perspective, as I look at, um, when I look at different things here, they've got some really good guiding proposals of, they have some really good contributing documentation. As I look at what we're doing with our projects, most of what's contained within the toolkit, at least right now, is collections of behaviors and converters and effects. The risk of oh gosh, they don't get something in, or I need to do something, you can back out of it pretty quickly if you needed to. You could fork it and do your own edit. And that's what we've been looking at from our perspective, because the benefit of pulling it in right now in its current state is far better than the ramifications of not using it and having to write everything on our own. At least that's been my experience so far.
Well, that's the beauty of open source right there. For projects that I work on, our rule with open source is if it doesn't work, we fork it, and then we maintain the fork.
And then you can update, and then you can contribute back to the fork, right? And that's, I think, the real big thing here is if you got into it, and let's just say you found something that you had to fork it because, oh my gosh, it didn't work. I think, it's definitely something that, they're going to take the contribution. If it's totally not working, they're going to be pretty quick to respond. So.
Absolutely. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So before we break into group time, I'm going to wrap up our presentation. Try to share the right screen. Did that. Thanks again for coming and doing the presentation today, Mitch. You had a couple comments in the chat about how this was really informative. It's a really great overview of a lot of your tips and tricks. So thank you for coming to share that. Share all that with us today. And our next meeting is going to be in January. We have a TBD here because I don't have any speakers lined up. So if anyone wants to come and present in January, get a hold of me, Twitter, email, however you want to get a hold of me. And that will be the second Wednesday of the month at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So keep your eyes peeled for some announcements, probably right at the beginning of January, because the holidays probably not going to announce the end of this month. But beginning of January, I'll make an announcement of who our speaker is. And until next time, thanks everyone for coming. We'll see you then.